Layman's terms. This is for non-mechanic.
Yeah. Socket's pretty self-explanatory. They do the same thing as wrenches, but a little more compact.
Right? Okay, because they're not like this.
Well, like if we have a bolt right here and these are the same, I can put this on the bolt, or I could put this on the bolt.
Yeah.
They're different, right? They do the same. They do the same job. At the end of the day, all we're doing on anything that's ever been made for people, mechanic-wise, is you're either putting the bolt in or you're taking the bolt out.
Bringing it down to the simplicity.
Or you're taking the screw out, or you're putting the screw in.
Okay.
Right? And there's more to it than that, right? But that when we talk about, like, if we want to really break it down from a 10,000 foot view, very basic, you're taking a component that has bolts on it or screws or whatever, and you're taking these out and putting them back in. We're not talking about electrical connectors and all that. Again, 10,000 foot view. We have SAE metric, right?
Okay.
And again, just to clarify, your size, if you have a 10 millimeter socket, the opening is going to be 10 millimeter, right? So the bolt you're going to put on, the opening is 10 millimeter.
So it's diameter.
Exactly. That's the way to think about it. Sockets, you can have 6 point, meaning see how many points you see in there?
Okay.
So inside the socket opening where you would actually put this on the bolt or the nut, you could have 6 points, you could have 12 points, and so on. Well, if you've got a 6 point bolt and you use a 12 point, it could not offer as much grip. Right? And
try to visualize.
Yeah.
That.
So how do I put this?
Layman's terms. This is for non-mechanic.
Yeah. So in your world, that when you're talking like DIY automotive, 6 points plenty. Right.
Okay.
So when you look inside the socket, you would see 6 points versus 12. These are 12 point because I was an aircraft mechanic.
Okay.
However, 12 points still works. 6 points better for you in automotive, in my opinion, because if you got a square, let's call it a 4 point.
Okay.
And you have a 4 point bolt.
Yes.
Well, that's going to fit perfectly over there, and it's going to turn it, right?
Yeah.
Well, imagine I take here and let's say we do an octagon now.
Okay.
And I have a square bolt, right? Your touch points are going to be limited in only 4 points now.
Okay.
Versus if I had a 4 point opening,
Uh-huh.
I'm still touching at 4 points, but that's the only points that it can touch. So I've got the whole wall touching. I've got this wall touching. I've got this wall touching. Well, now imagine I put an octagon over that square.
Uh-huh.
I'm only touching at the 4 points.
So
not
you
the
wanted
side walls, not anything else, right?
You wanted to get it to match as much as you can with how many points the bolt that you're matching it.
Theoretically, right?
Okay.
But they mainly make a 6 point and 12 point. However, both are perfect for you for automotive.
Okay.
But 6 point is better.
Okay.
In my personal opinion.
Okay.
Here's the kicker. If you have a 12 point bolt, which I don't know why they would do one in automotive, I don't even think it exists anymore. And yes, right? And that's more an aircraft with engines and stuff. We have a lot of 12 point smaller bolts, so that's why you'll see my setups all 12 point versus where your setup might be all 6 point.
Okay. That's cool.
Right? And then, like another thing you're going to see here, you're going to see 12 points.
Oh, and so there's 12 points on.
But again,
those.
Perfectly fine for what you're doing, right?
Okay.
It's just when you get a little more into the professional side, you don't want to be the professional mechanic who rounded out a bolt because you didn't have the right tool, especially when you're getting paid to do it.
Okay.
And like for me, I was working on $70-80 million aircraft, and a lot of bolts I would work on were titanium bolts that that were a couple $100 per bolt, right?
Wow.
So you got to again, we're talking about two different aspects. You work in DIY in your car versus a professional automotive mechanic working on a Mercedes versus me working on a $80 million aircraft. It's about professionalism, having the right tool for the right job. So do me a favor. So that's the top of the socket, right? That's what the bolt would set on, right? That's right. So flip them over.
Oh, so this looks different because this is what that goes into.
Yep. So flip them over. Now we have what we call the drive.
Okay.
So funny enough, when we talk about drive, we only have SAE. We don't have metric. So this could be a metric, right? This is a metric. This is a 12 millimeter socket.
Mm-hmm.
But when we talk about the drives, the parts that attach to your ratchet, this is called the drive, right? Here, driving.
Mm-hmm.
So we only have for what you're going to use, we'll just say there's 3 sizes. There's more than that, but we have a quarter drive. So if you were to measure that, that's a 1/4 inch wide.
Okay.
If you were to measure this one, this is 3/8 inch wide. And then we also have a 1/2 inch wide. That's basically all you need. There are 3/4 inch and so on, but for basics, this is all you need, right? So if you notice, this is a quarter drive. It matches up with the quarter drive socket.
Okay.
Plugs right in. Right?
How do you know is it labeled on here that it matches with
just
it?
Visually. Like look at the difference. Look how monstrous the differences are.
Because you said there would only be 3 ones that I would be using,
yes,
and I could visually look at it and tell which one.
Yep. So this is the smallest. This is the medium, and then if we had a 1/2 here, it would be that size. So you can dramatically tell the difference, right?
Oh, so this goes over
yes,
here.
correct. Right. So a good example is like this is pretty simplistic, but a quarter drive will not work in a 1/2.
Because it just doesn't.
Right. Or a 3/8 will not work in a quarter. Now, they make adapters and all that fit on here, and then so adapter would fit on here, then they would stick out a quarter. We're talking basics, right?
Yeah.
So not only when you buy your sockets, if you have to buy SAE and you buy metric, you essentially also have to buy quarter drive 3/8 half, quarter drive 3/8 half. Now, when we talk basics, theoretically a quarter drive or a 3/8 is plenty for you. Unless you start doing things like you're taking the wheels on and off, so the other thing too, imagine this tiny little quarter drive. If I were to apply, 300 foot-pounds of torque to it, probably I could snap this little socket. So the more power you need, the bigger bolts you get, you want to go up into the bigger sockets. When we talk about the length, it multiplies your power.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine if I had this, but now it's this long, I don't have to take a lot of force to get that big, strong bolt off, right? Right? Now we can see I got all 3, so you can compare quarter drive, 3/8, and 1/2. Remember, those are SE, those are Imperial, right? Exactly, right? So putting it on, you just smush it. So here, right? So if you notice, there's a little ball retainer right here. Push that ball. Feel how it goes in a little bit.
Oh, okay.
So that's to keep, when you put your socket on, it's to keep it from falling off.
Okay. That's cool.
We'll cover extensions, right? So for instance, take your quarter drive ratchet and your quarter drive socket, put it on there.
You have to push.
That one.
This one has a button on the back.
Some of them do have buttons, yeah.
Okay.
So now let's pretend whatever you're trying to get to, your bolt is here, and you can only get this far down. Can't get to it, right?
Okay.
So now take your socket off.
So you push
the button.
It's the button on the back. You push the button. Oh, this one has the one where you can change the angle.
Yeah, almost all ratchets have that.
Okay.
So now you put on an extension. Go ahead. Put on your socket.
This is weird.
Push.
Oh, I have to push that down.
There you go. Now, bolt's here. Now you can see how far you can stay away from it, right?
Oh, so like if you can't get your hand down in there.
Right? Yeah.
Okay.
Right, and there's a lot of times. Now, with that being said, again, this is a very simplistic starter video. We have your standard extensions, you have wobble extensions. So take this one off.
Oh, so this one just pops off. This one doesn't have this one has a little ball in there too.
Yeah. If you didn't have that, you would just have them falling off, right?
Oh, so it has to have.
So I know this is a quarter drive and this is a 1/2, but look at the difference on the ends. See how this one's more circled?
Oh.
Right?
That's cool.
Your right hand's a wobble.
The right hand.
So sometimes you need a little bit of an angle. So what you can do is you can push this. See how it allows the wobble?
Oh.
So now instead of going in, I'm limited to this angle. Now I can actually get a little bit of play.
And it still turns.
Well, I get different angles on it, right?
Okay. Push it on. Nice wobble. That's cool.
Yep. So again, it's about progress, not perfection. Do you need a wobble extension set when you first start? You don't, right? But they make variations of tools to make your life easier. So as you start turning wrenches more and more, and you like it, you'll start upgrading your tools for more specialty tools like wobble extensions. Because that one time it might save you 10 minutes. It might save you from busting your knuckles. It might save you from cursing yourself out or kicking something, right? So again, whenever we see basic tools, there are so many different versions of basic tools that have been modified a little bit to do a very specific job.
Okay.
Right? Now, just one example, you get way more power and you have less damage with a standard extension versus a wobble. Wobbles, you can't, in my opinion, you can't go as powerful. Obviously, you can see the play in there.
Yeah.
Right. So, again, it's all about preference, opinion. My opinion might be a lot different than other people. This is what I've learned and things I like. What you learn and what you like might be different.
Okay.
Right. So
when I first start and when someone else first starts, we probably won't need something like this. If we do an extension, it'd be something more.
Yeah. And then, and quickly to talk about extensions, they make 12-inch extensions, 2-inch extensions, 6-inch, 4-inch, whatever. And you can put as many as you need, right? So if you're trying to reach from here to your camera, it's obviously a joke, but you could put, several of these together, and then you could be back here turning your ratchet. Right, that's way over there, right? Again, that's
just for experimentation.
Yeah, that's a joke, but you get the point. Now, other things you can do, if we talk about having fulcrums and more power and so on, you can put a pipe on here. Like, let's say you have this guy, right? Mm-hmm. And you still can't break the nut. If you don't have access to power tools, air tools, or whatever, you could take like a metal pipe and slide over this and now extend this out.
So right? More MacGyver.
Yeah. When you tighten a bolt, you have a bolt with the threads and you have the nut. You're actually stretching the bolt when you tighten it. People have a hard concept understanding they're taking a metal bolt, a bolt, right?
Yeah.
T-bolt. You have a nut. Well, when you put that nut on there and it meets the part of the vehicle, so here's your nut. Your nut comes through. This is your bolt. This is your nut. Okay. Well, usually there's something. I can even put this on. Okay. So usually there's a piece of metal here that might be part of the car, whatever that this nut's going against. The bolt's sticking through, right? Yeah. When you tighten that nut, you're actually stretching and elongating that bolt
when it's hitting. Interesting.
No, so when you tighten this, so the bolt's fixed. Okay. So when you put it through, let's pretend this is the edge of the car. Okay. So this bolt's sticking through and this bolt is sticking out this much from the edge of the car. Okay. When you put the nut on there and you start turning the nut, nothing can move at that point. The piece of metal the car's on, whatever, you could cave that in, whatever, but if it's thick enough piece of metal, the bolt will actually start stretching. And that's how it's made to do. It's actually meant to do that. So the problem we have is, and that's why bolts and certain other things, they have torque references. Meaning this bolt should only be torqued to 10 foot-pounds.
How am I going to know that?
You're not.
Okay.
Right? But this comes back to my point where you find so many people, and especially DIYs, they tend to overthink, like, I'm going to take this bolt till I can't turn it no more. Okay. Well, if you got Zach over there,
he would probably break it off.
Well, you're gonna break a bolt. You're gonna over torque it, which is dangerous. Okay. Especially when we talk about wheels. When we talk about your lug nuts on your wheel. Yeah. So I'm sure you've seen people at auto shops just cranking your wheels down. Yeah. Well, the bolt, the stud that sticks out, when they put that lug nut on there, they're stretching that.
So every time you do that, I get my tires rotated and stuff.
Yeah, so you have fatigue at that point. Okay. You develop a crack. Now, beauty of cars is we have way more than one lug nut. If we only had one lug nut, it could be more dangerous. But that's just one example. So my point being is when you're tightening something, it doesn't always have to be gorilla tight, right? Okay. So
not Zach tight.
Yeah. And the reason is because you're going to go to remove that, and after it gets maybe a little rust in there, a little corrosion, it's going to be a nightmare to remove. Okay. Right. So, or it's so tight. And the other thing too is when you're tightening a bolt and a nut, you're developing heat. So when you're ratcheting a nut on there real hard and real fast, and you go super hard and tight, well, you heated that up, making it easier to install. So by the time it cools, it's going to be a nightmare to pull off. Right. So again, when you tighten stuff, obviously tight is tight, but if you tighten some as a DIY person, you don't have access to know what the torque specs and so on are. But you will, and it's super easy to understand this stuff. We'll do a couple things together. But when you go to tighten some, there's tight. You can just go a tiny bit more, and it's more than plenty for a DIY reference. Now, when I work on aircraft, every single bolt I touch has to be torqued to spec, because the last thing we want is something breaking in the air, breaking on takeoff, breaking on landing.
That makes sense.
Right. So in the aircraft mechanic world, everything gets torqued. right?
Okay.
Because that bolt and that nut has an exact amount of stretch. Now, in the old days, and some companies, they actually measure bolt stretch.
Oh my gosh, it's like
torque.
mind blowing.
I know. Right?
So torque is the amount of like turning so the force
Yep.
that when you turn, like how tight essentially you make
exactly,
it.
right?
Okay.
So let's put this in layman's terms. Like, so if you bench 100 pounds,
Okay.
let's just say you need 100 foot-pounds of torque to push it.
Okay.
Well, when you do 150 pounds, you need 150 pounds of torque. Again, people, I'm just using an analogy here so she understands, right?
My brain.
So, right, yeah. But let's go back to basics, right? The only point I'm trying to make is if you're a DIY person just starting out, you don't have to crank these bolts and everything down crazy tight.
Okay.
Right? A lot of things are meant, depending on what kind of, then we got different types of nut. We got lock washers. We have like so many things that prevent vibration and things coming apart. They don't always work like they're supposed to, but depending on what you're putting on, it might not need tightened down because it has a safety feature to make sure it doesn't back itself off. Another topic, another day.
So basic idea is you guys don't go so crazy with trying to over tighten it.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
it's, when you feel, especially on a DIY stuff you're doing yourself, when you feel it's tight, right?
Okay.
Now, if you go to build your second or third car, then probably by that point you'll know what torque is. You'll understand.
Second or third car, Zach?
Yeah. Yeah. So,
I think he's okay with me just sticking with one.
Yeah. Let's talk screwdrivers, right?
Okay.
Just like wrenches, there's thousands of options. Sockets, there's thousands of options. We have the same thing with the screwdrivers. But basically, you have a flathead or a straight edge.
Okay.
And then you have some people call it a cross, but we call it Phillips, right?
Phillips. Okay.
Yeah.
So flathead and Phillips, which I feel like that's something that you use in your house all the time, and I've used these ones to a basic extent.
Now, of everything you're going to touch on your car, anything with a flathead screw or a Phillips screw will be the most likely thing you round out and mess up.
Is it just because the way that it's designed?
Yeah, exactly, right? So if I'm on a screw, it's about the force I'm applying. If I'm only applying a little bit of force when I go to turn, it's easy to pop out of the screw, and then as you pop out, you're taking metal with you, right?
Well, this is going on the inside versus this is encapsulating the whole outside
thing, right?
of it.
Exactly, right?
Okay.
So, especially when we talk about screws and things like that, they do not need a ton of force either. You'll see guys out there with screw guns just ramming them down, right? And that's great when you're putting them on, but when it's time to take them off, if you do get them off without stripping them out, chances are there's still damage where you might as well just go ahead and replace that.
Okay.
Right. So, but just like everything else, we have short. These are called stubbies. Short. We have long. We have, so many different types. Right. Then we also have ratcheting.
Oh, they're getting fancy over here.
So left, right, tighty. Right.
Oh,
right?
cool.
And then this one changes bits on it.
I've seen those.
You can also change what type of inserts in it.
And this is usually a kit. Stuff?
Yeah, usually kit. Yeah, it had a backing on it, and I take the backing off.
This has all the different parts that. How do you even take this? You just pull it. Look. Fancy.
Yeah,
fancy.
So this one had a backing that had all the screws in it, all the adapters. So
it all came together like.
Well, it has these guys, right?
Okay.
I get rid of them. They're in my box because you'll be working. This thing will loosen up, and then suddenly you just drop like 6 of these in your engine bay.
Oh no!
Yeah, so
especially if you're working on your paint or like when you have stuff actually in your engine bay. Right now, mine's completely empty, but when you have stuff, it's like
exactly. So I know it looks a little weird. It looks like it's missing. I just take them out because I'm not taking. Some people tape them up. Some people super glue them. Some people just don't care. But it's preventing you from losing bits inside your engine bay or whatever, right? And I know it sounds like, it's just bit. Well, if you drop one on the ground that you didn't see, depending on how it's laying, when you roll over with your tire, now it's embedded in your tire, and you just ate a $300 or $400 tire. And we've seen so many examples of, we've even seen stuff with wrenches sticking in tires, sockets sticking in tires, screwdrivers sticking in tires. So, you might think dropping a small little bit is not important until your $400 tire finds it, and you didn't realize it till you're 10 miles from your house. Right?
Oh, and then you hear.
So, yeah. So, So the other thing too is then we have pliers. Pliers, again, all we're doing is removing things, opening things, and so on. Pliers, there's so many varieties. Again, start small, and as you start working through. So here's what's going to happen when you're working through your car. You're like, man, this tool just doesn't really do it for me. What kind of, and then you're going to go buy a new tool. then you're going to buy a new tool. But then fast forward 2-3 years from now, you're going to have all the tools you need, and it's going to be bought out of necessity and progression versus, right?
Yeah, because most people don't have I don't have the money to just go buy everything, and most people that I feel like that are first starting won't have the use for buying all these. Like, you want to make sure that the money you're spending is towards tools you'll actually want to use versus just buying a bunch of stuff that's going to collect dust.
They make companies out there where you can buy the toolbox tools and the foam already set up, ready to go.
Okay.
I'm completely against that because that's a general setup. They don't leave room for you to add to it. So when you buy the set, there's never a tool company out there that can sell you everything that you want right off the bat or everything you need right off the bat. So the problem with some of these stuff is like, yeah, it looks pretty. It's a great starter set. But when you say, oh man, I need a new set of wrenches that work better for me, where are you going to put them? Because the tools and toolboxes are already foamed out. There's no room. There's nothing. Now, some companies do a modification of this where they got like trays that plug into each other and all that. But you're welcome to go, like some of these tool sets you find out there, they're pretty affordable with the toolbox. It doesn't leave you room for expansion.
Okay.
Right? So in my opinion, start small and buy things out of necessity because those are going to be the tools you want versus buying something overall as a whole in the beginning. And you might only want 30% of those tools that are in there. Okay. You could find like Craftsman. Not a huge fan of Craftsman since they went to Chinese made. However, for the price, it's still good. And Craftsman sells oh, here's your 100-piece set. Here's your 300-piece set. Here's your 1,000-piece set. So theoretically, you could just go out and buy a Craftsman set that has all your basic stuff you need in one purchase.
Okay.
Right? So there's so many options out there. It's hard in a video just to say, this is what you get, this is what you should get, and blah, blah, blah. And but it might be better to show these people what you actually decide to buy as a starter set, and you can consult with me, and I'll tell you, this is it.
What this is, okay.
Yeah. Take advantage of those holiday specials. If it's
Father's Day?
if it's a month out from Father's Day, Black Friday, Christmas, July 4th, Memorial Day, whatever, your biggest sales happen around Black Friday and Christmas and July 4th, in my opinion. That's what we do. So if you really want to buy some tools and you're a month or two out, just wait. Unless you need them, just wait and take that 20, 30. I mean, we had some stuff that was 50% off on July 4th. So time it too. Unless you need it right then and there as you're doing the job, then you need to go get it. but time it and save money.
Thanks for watching part 2, Intro to Tools. Stay tuned next week where we dive into organization and how to find the right toolbox.